You'd think that being able to read people, feel deeply, and understand emotions would make someone easier to connect with. Most people assume that emotional intelligence is essentially a social superpower, that someone who understands feelings well would naturally have smoother relationships, deeper friendships, and an easier time being understood by others. But psychology research suggests something quietly paradoxical. People with the highest emotional intelligence are often the loneliest people in the room. Not because they lack social skill, but because of something far more specific happening inside their mind, and in how the people around them respond to them. Here is what the research actually tells us and why it matters. Psychologists define emotional intelligence as the ability to perceive, understand, manage, and use emotions, both your own and those of others, in ways that guide thinking and behavior. It was formally studied and named by researchers Peter Salovey and John Mayer in 1990, and later popularized by psychologist Daniel Goleman. What their work revealed, and what decades of subsequent research has confirmed, is that high emotional intelligence is not simply about being kind or empathetic. It is a sophisticated cognitive and emotional system, and like most sophisticated systems, it creates a particular kind of experience that people on the outside rarely see clearly. Reason 1. They feel what others haven't yet named. People with high emotional intelligence often sense the emotional undercurrent of a situation before anyone else has acknowledged it. They notice tension in a room before a single word is spoken. They detect sadness in someone's voice that the person themselves hasn't consciously registered yet. This ability, while remarkable, creates an immediate social gap. When you respond to an emotion that no one else has named yet, you appear reactive, oversensitive, or simply strange. The people around you aren't lying when they say nothing is wrong. They genuinely haven't felt it yet, but you already have. And that gap is one of the earliest and most consistent sources of misunderstanding. Reason 2. Their emotional honesty makes others uncomfortable. Highly emotionally intelligent people tend to communicate with a level of emotional precision that most people are not used to. They say things like, "I notice I feel disconnected from this conversation," or "something about that dynamic felt off to me." This kind of language is not dramatic. It is accurate. But in social environments where surface-level interaction is the norm, that accuracy can feel unsettling to others. People who are not used to emotional directness sometimes experience it as confrontational, intense, or too much. The emotionally intelligent person isn't being dramatic. They are simply being precise. But precision in emotional language is rare enough that it is frequently misread. Reason 3. They absorb emotional information constantly, which others interpret as moodiness. The emotionally intelligent brain is always processing, always scanning emotional data from conversations, environments, and interpersonal dynamics. This means that a highly emotionally intelligent person can walk into a situation feeling calm and walk out feeling heavy, not because anything dramatic happened, but because they absorbed the emotional residue of everything around them. To outside observers, this can look like unpredictable mood shifts. They seemed fine earlier. Why are they quiet now? What they are witnessing is not instability. It is the cost of sustained emotional awareness. A mind that is always tuned in will inevitably carry more weight than one that isn't. Reason 4. They process conflict differently, which gets mistaken for withdrawal. When conflict arises, most people either engage immediately or shut down defensively. People with high emotional intelligence tend to do something different. They pause, they reflect. They try to understand all sides of the emotional dynamic before responding. This measured approach is actually a sign of deep processing, but it is often interpreted as coldness, disinterest, or avoidance. The emotionally intelligent person isn't withdrawing. They are thinking more carefully than the situation may seem to require. And that carefulness, that refusal to react before understanding, is frequently mistaken for emotional distance. Reason 5. Consider this for a moment. Every pattern described so far, the early sensing, the emotional honesty, the absorbed wait, the reflective pauses, none of these are flaws. They are the architecture of a mind that experiences the emotional world at a frequency most people simply don't have access to. And yet they are consistently interpreted as problems, as too sensitive, as too intense, as difficult. The very capacities that make someone emotionally intelligent are the ones that make them hardest to understand. That paradox is worth sitting with before we continue. Reason 6. People project their own emotional limitations onto them. One of the less discussed dynamics of high emotional intelligence is how it affects the people around it. When someone consistently demonstrates greater emotional awareness, others can feel implicitly compared, exposed, or inadequate, even when no comparison is intended. This can generate a subtle but real social friction. People may pull back, become defensive, or dismiss the emotionally intelligent person as overthinking or being too sensitive. What is actually happening is a kind of projection. The discomfort belongs to the observer, not the observed. But the emotionally intelligent person is the one who ends up feeling like something is wrong with them. Reason 7. Their empathy is mistaken for weakness. In many social and professional environments, emotional sensitivity is still quietly coded as vulnerability rather than strength. When a highly emotionally intelligent person acknowledges the pain of others, advocates for emotional honesty, or refuses to pretend that something difficult is fine, they are sometimes perceived as fragile or overly emotional. The irony is that managing deep emotional awareness without becoming overwhelmed requires extraordinary internal strength. Empathy at this level is not weakness dressed up. It is one of the most cognitively demanding capacities a person can possess. Reason 8. They carry the emotional weight of relationships silently. People with high emotional intelligence often become the person others come to, the one who listens without judgment, who notices when something is wrong, who holds space for other people's experiences. Over time, this creates an invisible imbalance. They give emotional support generously, but rarely receive it in equal measure. Partly because others assume they are fine, and partly because their own emotional needs are harder to read from the outside. The result is a quiet exhaustion that accumulates beneath the surface. And because they rarely broadcast their own struggles, the people around them are often genuinely surprised when they finally do. Reason 9. They are often ahead of the emotional curve in relationships. Highly emotionally intelligent people tend to see where a relationship is going before the other person does. They notice the slow drift before it becomes a fracture. They feel the shift in energy before anything has been said. This means they are often processing the ending of something while others are still experiencing the middle. When they try to address what they sense, they are frequently told they are imagining things, being paranoid, or creating problems that don't exist. Until eventually, the thing they sensed all along becomes undeniable. By then, the emotionally intelligent person has already grieved it twice. Here is what all of this points to. Emotional intelligence is not a simple gift. It is a particular way of moving through the world, one that makes you more attuned, more perceptive, and more capable of genuine human connection, but also one that places you slightly out of step with a world that is still learning to value what you offer. Being misunderstood is not evidence that something is wrong with you. It is often evidence that you are operating at a depth that takes others time to reach. And perhaps the most important thing psychology can offer someone who lives this way is not a strategy for being understood more easily. Perhaps it is simply this: the depth you carry is real, the weight of it is real, and so is the extraordinary capacity for connection that lives on the other side of it. You were never too much. You were simply more than most people knew how to meet.